The human shuffled through the crowded corridors of Starport K, balancing the oddly shaped package in his hands like it was a live alien creature ready to bite. Neon lights flickered overhead, reflecting off polished metal walls and the occasional puddle of spilled synth nectar. He had rehearsed the moment 100 times in his head, but reality was never that cooperative. A stray service droid zipped past, its wheels squeaking like a hyperactive rodent, and knocked his elbow. The package tilted dangerously and he yelped, catching it just before it hit the floor. "Okay, steady, Etta," he muttered to himself. "It's just a knife, just an assassin's knife. Totally normal birthday gift." He paused, realizing he was talking to himself, which probably made him look even more suspicious to passing alien pedestrians, some of whom were juggling multiple floating briefcases or hovering pets. He remembered her instructions about not hurting her, an odd request for someone who had survived the siege of Varlon IV and fought off mercenaries in 3 different sectors. But he was pretty sure the human code for gift giving did not come with a warning label like, "Do not maim or assassinate recipient." He ducked under a swinging hatch and muttered a small prayer to the obscure god of awkward interstellar etiquette. His palms were sweaty inside the gloves he had insisted on wearing to keep a grip on the package, and he was fairly certain the human sweat glands had no business in a spaceport where humidity hovered around -5%. The alien woman waited in her quarters at the far end of the corridor, or at least that was where her holo sign projected her presence. She looked, from a distance, almost human. Long, graceful limbs, sharp but elegant features, eyes that glimmered like twin moons in the dim light. The most obvious difference were her ears, long, delicate, and tapering like radar dishes. They twitched independently at every sound. The squeal of the droid, the echo of boots on metal, the distant rumble of anti-grav transports. The human imagined them flicking at him, assessing his worthiness, or perhaps calculating the exact probability that he would drop the knife and maim himself in the process. He hesitated outside her door, listening. A faint chuckle floated out, a sound not unlike a starship engine sputtering, yet undeniably amused. She was already suspicious, probably expecting something ridiculous, something dangerous, and likely something both at once. He squared his shoulders, took a breath that smelled faintly of burnt noodles from the last portside cafe, and stepped inside. Her eyes immediately landed on the package and her ears twitched in synchronized alarm. "You brought me, what?" she asked, her voice calm but dripping with incredulity. "A gift," he said, trying to inject cheer into his tone, which came out more like a nervous squeak. "Happy birthday." She raised a single eyebrow, a motion so sharp it could have cut metal. "This looks hazardous." "It's just a knife," he said, which sounded both like an understatement and a confession. "But not just any knife. Look, it's handcrafted, energy-infused, capable of," he caught himself. "Not that you'd, use it on me, definitely not." Her ears twitched in amusement or skepticism, he wasn't sure which. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the package. "Are you trying to kill me or just test my patience?" He laughed nervously. "Neither, I promise, it's more of a trust thing." "Trust," she repeated slowly, the corners of her lips twitching. "Ah, humans, always so dramatic. You might survive in a galactic war zone, but you clearly do not understand birthday etiquette." She extended a hand, long fingers brushing against the package, and he braced himself, half expecting a laser trap or a sudden explosion. Instead, she lifted it with care, rotating it like a jeweler examining a rare crystal. She said thoughtfully, "An assassin's knife. And you expect me to find this amusing? Why exactly?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, I figured maybe you'd appreciate the craftsmanship. And also, I've been told that nothing says happy birthday like a slightly terrifying lethal weapon. It's a human thing." Her chuckle was low, rolling like distant thunder, and her ears twitched in mock approval. "A human thing, I see. And here I thought humans were complicated enough without gifting me items that could literally end my life." He winced. "It's decorative mostly, and also symbolic, like trust and friendship and danger, but mostly trust." "Mostly trust," she repeated, the words dripping with sarcasm. She placed the knife on a levitating display stand that had been hovering in the corner of the room, holding it as if she were defusing a bomb. She said, glancing at him, "this would make an excellent centerpiece for an intergalactic dinner party." Imagine the conversation. "Oh yes, the assassin's knife, a gift from my human friend. No, it has never drawn blood." She smirked, her sharp teeth catching the light, and the human laughed, relieved that she was still mostly friendly. I mean, I could have gotten you something less lethal, he said, fidgeting with his gloves. Like a hollow sculpture of a space whale, but that seemed too normal. Too normal, she said, amusement dancing in her gaze. I appreciate the creativity, human, and your complete lack of survival instincts, both admirable traits. He shuffled closer, still wary of sudden movements. I just wanted to do something memorable. Memorable indeed, she said, picking up the knife again, spinning it in her hands with a careful flick. I am impressed and slightly terrified, but mostly impressed. Her ears twitched once more, a movement that seemed almost like laughter in alien terms. You really do have a way of making ordinary life interesting, don't you? He grinned a little too broadly. I try. For the first time, the tension between them dissolved into something more human than alien. Laughter. She made a small, theatrical bow with the knife, like a dancer mid-performance. Well, human, she said, let us see if your sense of humor survives a proper training session. After all, a gift like this requires context, and context, my friend, is usually delivered with pain. He swallowed hard, both terrified and intrigued, but for now she was still laughing. And that, he realized, was a victory in itself. The human, the alien, and the peculiar knife hung in a space where danger, humor, and unexpected trust coexisted, a fragile truce punctuated by flickering neon lights and the occasional squeak of malfunctioning droids. The first step of an unpredictable friendship, and perhaps a ridiculous, chaotic adventure, had begun. The next morning, the human stumbled out of the narrow, humming corridors of the alien warrior's ship, his limbs stiff, his pride bruised, and his breakfast, an experimental protein gel that promised energy beyond quantum thresholds, still lodged stubbornly in his throat. The alien woman, already stretching her long limbs and letting her ears flick lazily in every direction, watched him with a faint smirk that suggested she had anticipated every embarrassing moment of the previous day. Ah, you survived the night without accidentally slicing off a finger, she said, her voice a mix of amusement and approval. Or at least I think you did. I didn't check all your vital signs, would have been uncouth. The human coughed, sputtering, and wiped at the sticky remnants of the gel on his gloves. I am fine, totally fine, and I did not almost die. He paused, much. Her ears twitched, catching a tiny squeak from a maintenance droid outside. Much, she echoed. I'm relieved. I'd hate to have to introduce you to the ship's medbots. They have a tendency to lecture humans about fragile anatomy, not that you'd listen, of course. Hey, I'm listening. Sort of, he protested, backing toward the door of the training chamber. He had already been warned yesterday that surviving one day aboard this ship required a combination of agility, caution, and the ability to endure constant ridicule. It was clear he was failing at all three. She gestured toward the gravity-controlled chamber where training sequences were conducted. The floor shimmered with anti-grav lines, and a series of holographic targets hovered at varying heights. Today, she said, we begin with practical lessons in trust and competence. And also entertainment for me. I need to see whether this human brain of yours can multitask without catastrophically failing. The human stepped in, unsure whether he was supposed to be impressed or terrified by the floating targets, which looked like they were ripped straight from a quantum physics textbook but with exaggerated alien features. Are these, alive? He asked. Not alive, she said, spinning the assassin's knife between her fingers with a grace that made it look like it was obeying some unspoken law of physics. They are dangerously convincing holograms. But feel free to imagine them alive. It improves the tension and your comedic potential. Comedic potential? He repeated, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Exactly, she said, as a holographic target suddenly zipped past, narrowly missing him and exploding into harmless sparks. You'll need it. Efficiency is boring. Comedy keeps the blood pumping and morale interesting. The first round began, and it quickly became apparent that zero-gravity training was an entirely new form of chaos. The human tripped over invisible lines of gravitational modulation, sending him spinning through the air like a poorly thrown satellite. The alien woman darted between targets, slicing or tapping them with precision, all while adding colorful commentary. Careful, that one has sarcasm. Don't let sarcasm pierce your ego, she called as he flailed. A miscalculated leap sent him crashing into a cluster of floating supply crates, one of which unceremoniously toppled into a small containment field, launching a miniature anti-grav snowstorm across the chamber. The human's arms flailed helplessly as holographic targets laughed at him in programmed tones of mockery. "I think the targets like you," she said, tilting her head. "They enjoy slapstick." "Great, fantastic," he muttered, disentangling himself. "I always wanted to be a comedic sideshow." "Not a sideshow," she corrected, flicking the knife through the air with a flourish. "A heroic if clumsy sideshow, there's a difference. Observe." She leapt, flipping through zero gravity like a dancer defying physics, tapping targets in midair and landing lightly on a platform without displacing a single crate. Then she paused, one ear flicking. "Your turn again." The human swallowed and lunged toward the nearest target, only to misfire a pulse emitter that ricocheted off a wall, pinged a small robotic cleaner, and somehow resulted in the droid floating upside down while squeaking in alarm. He groaned, "I am clearly terrible at this." "You are uniquely terrible," she said, trying not to laugh as she floated beside him. "But there's a certain charm, an adaptability." The droid seems mildly impressed or terrified. Could go either way. After several rounds of controlled chaos, they paused for a meal, a floating buffet of alien delicacies suspended in mini anti-grav fields. The human poked at a pulsating gelatin sphere with a fork, only for it to emit a small spark and stick briefly to his glove. "A dinner." The alien woman laughed, the sound echoing like wind across metal canyons. "Don't eat the sentient jellyfish," she warned, though the sphere seemed utterly unconcerned. "It's polite but surprisingly sticky. I promise the taste is worth it mostly." As they floated in midair, eating, laughing, and occasionally flipping upside down unintentionally, the human realized that this training wasn't merely about physical prowess. It was a lesson in trust, improvisation, and surviving the unpredictable nature of life with someone entirely alien. Each mistake brought more laughter than reprimand, each flub a test of patience and adaptability. And somewhere in all the absurdity, a fragile bond was forming. Later, as the sun, or what passed for a sun in this sector, slid lazily across the viewport, the alien woman tested the knife's energy field, demonstrating its subtle capabilities with precision. The human leaned in, awe mixing with trepidation. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "Beautiful and dangerous," she said, flicking it into her palm, "like any meaningful friendship. Remember, it is the thought, the trust, and the humor that matter most, not the risk of slicing off a finger or two." Her ears twitched again and she added, "mostly." He laughed, realizing that the absurdity of the day, zero-gravity mishaps, sentient gelatin spheres, nearly homicidal targets, had somehow forged the kind of connection he hadn't expected. Humor, he realized, was the weapon that would carry them through the chaos to come. By the time training ended, the human had survived without permanent injury, though his dignity was in shreds. And the alien warrior, ever precise, ever deadly, had begun to appreciate the strange combination of audacity, clumsiness, and humor that the human brought to her life. They were an improbable team, yes, but the kind of improbable that could survive anything, from space pirates to zero-gravity disasters to birthdays that involved deadly knives as gifts. The day closed with the human lying on a gravity-neutral mat, staring at the ceiling, while she hovered nearby, sharpening the knife with deliberate care and occasional smirks. "Tomorrow," she said, "we escalate. And by escalate I mean slightly more terrifying tests. Also, I expect fewer collisions with the walls, but humor is non-negotiable." The human groaned but managed a weak grin. Noted, less destruction, more humor, got it. Her ears twitched once more, almost like a laugh in alien terms. "Excellent, you're learning, slowly but memorably." And in the soft hum of the ship's engines, amidst floating debris and scattered anti-grav objects, a sense of anticipation lingered. Adventure awaited, chaotic and unpredictable, and together they would meet it with humor, audacity, and the strange, growing trust that only humans and alien warriors could share. The alarm blared like a hyperactive nebula on steroids, sending the human shooting upright in his gravity-neutral bed, only to find himself spinning slowly in midair while clutching a half-empty mug of breakfast gel. The alien warrior woman hovered beside him, her ears flicking in perfect synchronization, each twitch a silent indicator of her heightened awareness. She was already dressed for battle, or at least, as close to her interpretation of casual combat attire as one could get, with layered armor plating that gleamed like polished obsidian, the assassin's knife strapped prominently across her back. "Relax," she said, her voice calm, almost musical but tinged with amusement. "Mostly, space pirates are attempting an unscheduled boarding. Happy birthday indeed." The human coughed into his mug, which had somehow turned upside down in zero gravity. They're pirates already." "They're punctual," she replied. "I like that. Organization in a chaotic universe is admirable and amusing." "Mostly amusing." Within seconds, the ship's corridors were alive with blaster fire, zipping laser bolts, and the chaotic squeals of malfunctioning droids. The human grabbed the assassin's knife, still trying to convince himself that it was more symbolic than lethal, though the tiny energy hum it emitted seemed to suggest otherwise. He tripped over a floating cargo container almost immediately, spinning like a rogue satellite, and slammed into a wall panel that thankfully absorbed the impact. "Good start," she said from above, flipping elegantly through zero gravity, striking down pirates with effortless precision. "Less enthusiasm, more focus, human." "I'm focused," he shouted, dodging another blaster bolt only to collide with a floating holographic display of the starship's schematics. Kind of. One pirate, clearly unfamiliar with zero-gravity etiquette, floated past him and collided with a maintenance droid, sending both into a slow-motion tumble of sparks and panicked squeaks. The human seized the opportunity to jab the knife into the nearest pirate's energy shield, triggering a harmless but dazzling display of sparks. The alien woman spun beside him, slicing another opponent with finesse while letting out a playful, teasing quip. "Bravo, you've discovered the art of accidental heroism." He wiped a smear of gel from his face, grinning despite the chaos. "I'll take it." The battle unfolded like a bizarre dance, blending the deadly with the absurd. Pirates tumbled over anti-gravity cargo crates, their limbs flailing, while droids swooped in to administer gentle shocks as warnings. The human gradually adapted, moving with more purpose, anticipating trajectories, and even managing a few deliberate strikes. Every misstep still produced comedy, like floating into a holographic emergency evacuation sign that left him dangling upside down. But now, each mistake came with a small victory. Amid the chaos, the alien woman's sharp eyes caught a particularly ambitious pirate attempting to reach the ship's control panel. "Human," she said sharply, "intercept that one." The human hesitated only a moment before lunging with newfound confidence. The knife hummed in his hand, energy fields flaring, and he tapped the pirate's shield with surprising accuracy, sending the intruder spinning harmlessly into a containment field. He floated there, stunned, and then slowly turned to face the woman, who tilted her head with a small, approving smile. "You're improving," she said. "Faster, less panicked, and amusingly slightly less likely to destroy the ship. Impressive." As the last pirate was subdued, the corridors returned to an eerie calm. Smoke from scorched wires curled in lazy spirals, and droids buzzed over the wreckage, muttering repair diagnostics in monotone voices. The human leaned against a wall, catching his breath. "We did it." "We did," she said, brushing dust from her armor. She finally looked at him fully, her eyes warm, no longer just measuring threat levels or amusement. "You survived. Not just the pirates, but the day and my eccentricity." He swallowed, the adrenaline still coursing through him, and laughed weakly. "I think I'm going to need a vacation after this, or maybe therapy." "Both are advisable," she replied. Her long ears flicked in a movement that might have been a smile in alien terms. "But I'd say you've earned something more meaningful than rest or therapy." She gestured toward the floating display stand where the assassin's knife now hovered. The human approached, wary. "I thought it was dangerous." "Dangerous, yes," she said, spinning it gently. "But that is not the point is trust. You held it, even clumsily. You survived the lessons, the absurdities, and the pirates. You didn't run. You didn't give up. You learned to navigate chaos with a certain style. That is what makes a gift meaningful." The human reached out slowly, touching the knife, and felt a faint hum of energy, not threatening but alive, almost approving. He realized then that the journey had changed him. He was still clumsy, still prone to comic accidents, but he had learned resilience, improvisation, and the strange, grounding power of humor in the face of danger. "You've grown," she said, her voice softening. "Not just in skill, but in patience, and maybe even in understanding alien humor, a rare human accomplishment." He laughed, realizing she had just complimented him in the most indirect, alien way possible. I'll take it, he said. Together they returned to the main deck, floating amid anti-grav furniture and the occasional humming droid. The ship's systems had been repaired or at least temporarily stabilized, and the aftermath of the chaos left a kind of sparkling order in its wake. They settled into the ship's observation deck, the vast expanse of stars stretching endlessly beyond reinforced glass. The human glanced at the knife, now sheathed and glowing softly, a symbol of trust, friendship, and the peculiar bond they had formed. You know, he said after a pause, I think I might actually enjoy this intergalactic chaos thing, with the right company, of course. Her ears twitched in a gesture that could have been amusement or agreement. With the right company, she echoed, even disaster becomes manageable and occasionally entertaining. For a long moment, they floated in silence, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the ship and distant twinkles of starlight. He realized that the absurd, dangerous, and hilarious moments of the past days had fused into a new understanding. Between them, between human and alien, between fear and trust. The human finally smiled, a real, unguarded smile, feeling a rare sense of accomplishment. He had come into her life carrying a knife, unsure of her reaction, untested in the ways of alien unpredictability. Now he had survived battles, laughter, zero-gravity disasters, and even his own incompetence. He had grown in ways he hadn't anticipated, and he understood, perhaps for the first time, that courage and humor were not opposites, they were partners. The alien warrior woman floated beside him, the knife glinting faintly in its display, and let the silence settle comfortably. Somewhere in the endless expanse of stars, a birthday gift had transformed into a bridge of trust. He glanced at her, a spark of mischief in his eyes. So, he said, next